أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, may the peace and blessings of Allah, the Exalted, be upon the Prophet Muhammad and his purified progeny, and may the damnation of Allah Azza wa Jal be upon their enemies. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our 20th episode of the Ghulu series. Now, one clip which I've seen some of the nawasib use, and I also included this clip on my promo, was of a Muamam who was on the pulpit saying that Imam Ali alayhi salam said, "Ana al-musawwir fil arham." I am the one who shapes in the wombs.
امیرالمومنین رو میخونم که فرمود انا مصور فی الارحام. بچه‌های تو رحم مادر و مولا فرمود منم که صورتشون رو نقش میکنم.
So the nawasib have presented this clip and tried to show that the Shia believe it is Imam Ali alayhi salam who shapes in the wombs. And if this is a belief of the Shia, then is such a belief shirk? We will look into this inshallah ta'ala. And we will also see what the books of the sect that refers to itself as Ahl Sunnah say about shaping in the womb. Now, to start off this episode, we want to read the following verse of the Holy Quran, where Allah Azza wa Jal says the following: هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء. That Allah Azza wa Jal is the one who shapes you in the wombs how He wills. There is no God but Him, and He is the mighty and the wise. So when we see this verse of the Holy Quran, we see that Allah Azza wa Jal, the attribution of shaping, for example, the fetus, the baby fetus in the womb, is attributed to Allah Azza wa Jal. We find in another verse that Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ, that Allah Azza wa Jal knows what is in the wombs. So the creation, and specifically the human being, is one of the great signs of Allah Azza wa Jal to show His existence. And we show His existence, Allah's existence, through the magnificence of His creation. When one sees how a small drop of sperm can form into a fully functioning human being with an intellect who is capable of doing great things and inventing great things. So this is amazing for us to see, and this is something for all of us to ponder upon. And when one deeply studies the body and how it works together, they see that it must be an intelligent designer who put this together, because it works together in a way, and how, for example, you have good bacteria and bad bacteria, or that bacteria which fights off, for example, those things which harm your body. We see that all of this must have been put in place on purpose and by someone who is an intelligent designer, or something which is an intelligent designer. Now, in the verse I quoted, Allah Azza wa Jal says He knows what is in the wombs. Someone may come along and say, okay, but we know what is in the wombs now. We know if it's a girl, we know if it's a boy, we know if it's deformed. So your God was speaking in the Holy Quran, thousands of years ago, and this shows it's not actually from God, because at that time they didn't have technology to see what is in the womb. Whereas us, we see what is in the wombs these days. So how is that something good where Allah says, يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ, that He knows what is in the wombs? Yes, we say that before any technology, we only know what is in the wombs, not from our for example, eyes, hearing or senses. We only know what is in the wombs because of technology that we've developed. And what we say further, and some of the mufassirin, those who give Quranic exegesis, what they say is that no, Allah Azza wa Jal, it's not just about knowing what is in the wombs. Yes, we've reached that stage. Allah Azza wa Jal knows the future of this person, whether they will be evil, whether they will be pious, the actions that they will commit. You know, will they have an offspring or not have an offspring, where they will go, whereas we do not know any of this. And yes, some of the prophets and the imams alayhim salam, they were informed from what? Knowledge of the unseen, or the messengers, and they were given this, for example, by Allah Azza wa Jal, where they would know future events, or where someone would be killed, or how they would be killed, etc. Because this is from the knowledge of the unseen Allah Azza wa Jal gives to some of His servants. Not completely, as only Allah Azza wa Jal has complete knowledge of the unseen, but He gives this to some of His servants. So yes, Allah Azza wa Jal knows what is in the wombs, but it doesn't just stop here. Rather, we say that when we elaborate on this verse, that Allah knows what will happen to those in the wombs. He knows what is in the womb, is it a boy and a girl, and their outcome in the future, which we do not know. And the human being, due to their weakness and inability, were not able to know what was in the wombs. Whether it was a boy or girl, whether it will be disabled or not, what it looks like, the shape of it. It was only through technology and other instruments, whereas Allah Azza wa Jal does not need any type of instrument to know this. So Allah Azza wa Jal, as I said in this verse, He says He is the one that shapes in the wombs. Okay? So does Allah Azza wa Jal, for example, have this as a process? Does it automatically happen? We will elaborate on this inshallah ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jal says in a verse that He knows what is in the wombs. And when we go down, we see that in another verse in chapter 59, verse 24, Allah says, هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. Allah Azza wa Jal in this verse says that He is Allah, so He is the creator. هو الله الخالق, that Allah is the creator, and He is the inventor of all things. Al-Musawwir, the bestower of forms. So one of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Musawwir, as shown in the Holy Quran. This is one of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal, that He is the one that bestows forms, not just of the fetuses, as Allah says that He shapes in the wombs, but of all things. This is what Allah mentions in the verse. To Him belongs the best names, the Asma'ullah al-Husna, which we'll speak about at some point. All that is in the heavens and the earth glorify Him, and He is the Almighty, the All-Wise. So this is chapter 59, verse 24 of the Holy Quran. So we have 3 verses that we've looked at now. The one which says that Allah Azza wa Jal shapes in the wombs, how He decides. We have the other verse where Allah Azza wa Jal says that He knows what is in the wombs, and we spoke about this, we elaborated on this. It doesn't just mean the shape of the baby, it means the future, for example, of this person. You know, will the baby even survive or not? These are things, for example, some of them about knowing the baby, which we found through technology. Allah Azza wa Jal knows the future of this, which we do not. And then the 3rd verse where Allah Azza wa Jal says that He is Musawwir. So as we know, this name, according to the Quran, is clear that it applies to Allah Azza wa Jal. So can someone start saying Imam Ali alayhi salam is also Musawwir? That Imam Ali alayhi salam shapes the fetuses in the womb, as seen in that clip? We will elaborate on this inshallah ta'ala. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He decided on how the creatures should look. الَّذِي خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى, as the Quran says. Allah Azza wa Jal, He created, and He created in an intelligent way. For example, He could have put our eyes on the back of our head, on the side of our face. He didn't do that. He put our eyes here, our mouth here, and He created in a way which all of these things work together and serve a purpose. So Allah Azza wa Jal did not merely create, rather He also fashioned, shaped in a way which makes sense and in a way which cooperates with each other. For example, the things in the person's body. This is how Allah Azza wa Jal created. Now a question might come up of some of the people watching this. Why is it that someone on the minbar wearing Shia clothing attributed this to Imam Ali alayhi salam? Is there a source which says this? Now, dear brothers and sisters, I searched throughout all of the ahadith that I could find to see, do any of them say that Imam Ali alayhi salam is musawwir. And it's not just this Muamam that quoted it, there are also clips of Pakistani speakers saying that Imam Ali alayhi salam is musawwir. So surely if they are quoting such quotes, there should be a basis for them. Now, dear brothers and sisters, one thing that we face which is very problematic, and some brothers have mentioned this, which I agree with on this point, that there are many people in the pulpits that they will quote very obscure narrations and singular reports which are not found maybe in any other book, or they're found in a source which is very heavily disputed, or is not from, for example, the classical Shia books of ahadith, and is found in some later source. So this is a problem, that some speakers have just quoted anything without checking the authenticity of it. Not just the authenticity of the chain, but whether the matan, the content of the narration, matches with the Quran and the overall established narrations which are taken by many of the scholars for the Shia Aqidah. So some people unfortunately do not check this. So when I looked through the ahadith, I did not find this in any of the ahadith where Imam Ali alayhi salam is attributed to him, that he apparently said, Ana al-musawwir fil arham, that I am the one who shapes in the wombs. It seems that he is giving this attribute of Allah to himself. I did not find this in any of the ahadith, rather I found it in the heavily disputed sermon which is attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam, called Khutbah Al-Bayan. Now you'll find some people taking from this khutbah, despite the problems of it which are mentioned by some of the ulama. Firstly, the language and content of this khutbah is very problematic and has a ghulu in it. Not to say every single line would be ghulu or exaggeration, but this khutbah itself, many of the ulama, they mention the lines in it which wouldn't be the speech, and it's not known to be the language of Imam Ali alayhi salam, where some of the things he is saying are actually attributes only for Allah Azza wa Jal, and it seems that he is giving himself lordship in the khutbah. So some people mention, or ulama mention in fact, because we don't care what some people say, some of the ulama mention, or many of them mention, that this khutbah has clear ghulu, exaggeration in it, and some people can read it for themselves. Of course, some of those who are ghulat or exaggerators, or have not necessarily ghulat, but they have this exaggerating type of tendency, they'll say, oh, you don't have ma'rifah of the imam, so you can't understand it. But the problem about these people is that they don't have any standards. They literally take anything that's attributed to the imams alayhim salam. Because secondly, we've said the language of this khutbah is problematic. And secondly, it doesn't have any chain, so we don't even know who attributed this to Imam Ali alayhi salam. Who heard this from Imam Ali alayhi salam? That's not known. And a lot of the content of this khutbah cannot be established in any of the other narrations. Although some have tried to make a commentary on it, I believe there's one Farsi commentary. What is mentioned in this cannot be found, some of the lines, in any of the other books of ahadith. So there's no chain for it. The language is problematic. And furthermore, so we can't take aqidah from this khutbah because it's not authentically proven, and it's not mutawatir as well, like narrated to such a high scale. We also find that some say that the language in it even has problematic things, such from a grammatical analysis, that there are problems in the sarf and nahu, that the person who wrote this didn't have proficient Arabic, otherwise it wouldn't have attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam, because we know Imam Ali alayhi salam, he was the most eloquent. So some of the ulama, and I can put a screenshot up there, have mentioned that this khutbah has problems in the grammar, and therefore if it has problems within the Arabic, this could not be something from a ma'soom, and someone who would be attributing this to a ma'soom would be insulting the ma'soom alayhi salam. So again, what have I said? The Khutbah Al-Bayan, which this thing about Imam Ali shaping in the wombs, this line is found in Khutbah Al-Bayan. There's no solid chain for this. The language is problematic in terms of the content of the language, and from the grammar we can't establish who it's from. And would Imam Ali alayhi salam start giving an attribute of Allah Azza wa Jal to himself, saying that he is the Musawwir, whereas Allah Azza wa Jal clearly says in the Holy Quran that Musawwir is one of his names. And we also see, dear brothers and sisters, that in some of the supplications attributed to the Imams alayhim salam, that Musawwir is not given to them, and they do not give it to themselves. And even if you look in the books of tafasir, I've looked in many of the Shia tafasir, one of them being that people call Al-Burhan, that is a narration-based tafsir, or tafsir safi, again, that use that narration style, or many of the other Shia tafasir, there is not one I found which attribute al-musawwir to Imam Ali alayhi salam. Rather, they say this is about Allah Azza wa Jal. And in the dua, for example, dua Joshan al-Kabir. Now, many people know this dua, and they recite it during Shahr Ramadan. And the content of this dua, it might not necessarily be proven by an authentic chain, but the content of this dua speaks about the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal and the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal. And one reciting it can see that it's a very powerful dua, which can be proven and matched with other narrations. Because if something is weak, it doesn't necessarily mean it's weak by chain, we completely reject it. Rather, we can reprove its content through other narrations which are established. But within this dua that we read, it says, Ya man yusawwiru fil arhami ma yasha. So it says in this that, O one, when we're calling upon Allah Azza wa Jal in this narration, in this dua, we say that, O He, meaning Allah who fashions in the womb as He wishes. So again, the Quran attributes musawwir, shaping in the wombs, to Allah Azza wa Jal. The dua attributed to the imams says that it is Allah. Ya man, we call on Allah, we say, Ya man yusawwiru fil arhami ma yasha. O He who fashions in the womb as He wishes. This is again attribute to Allah Azza wa Jal.
Ya man yusawwiru fil arhami ma yasha. Ya man yakhtassu bi rahmatihi man yasha.
And the only attribution to Imam Ali alayhi salam, saying that he is the one that shapes in the wombs, is Khutbah Al-Bayan, which we cannot take aqidah from, and we cannot establish some of these lines from any other narration, whether it be narrations of Al-Kafi, or whether it be narrations, for example, of any of our 4 books, or even some of the later ahadith books. Therefore, we do not attribute this to Imam Ali alayhi salam, that he is the one that shapes in the wombs, as it does not go with the Quran, and it contradicts authentic narrations found in Al-Kafi. So what we'll do, inshallah ta'ala, is in the next episode, we will look at our narrations, and then we will look at the narrations of the mukhalifin, because the nawasib, they try to portray it by saying Imam Ali alayhi salam shapes in the wombs. This is shirk, you're calling him Allah Azza wa Jal. So what we will do is show that if they want to call this shirk, they shoot themselves in the foot. So join me for the next episode, inshallah ta'ala, where we will continue on this topic about shaping in the wombs and whether this can be attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam.